Okay, then let's begin. I'd like to welcome you all to the Help the Helpers comedy special. I'm going to be your opening act. The headliners are going to come after me. I'm just here to warm up the crowd, and trust me, they're Lynn and Liz, and they'll be a lot funnier than I'm going to be. Because I'm going to start off with a bit of theory, and theory isn't usually funny. But making fun of somebody who thinks too much, that can be funny. So I'll be the straight man for such purposes. I'll be the old straight cis white man. You know, I represent the group that ruined things for future generations, okay? So the way I look at it, humor is an attitude, like curiosity, gratitude, acceptance. I find being alive humorous. Not merely so, but if the humor component is gone, something important is missing. We were wondering if Help the Helpers had that problem, not enough humor. Was it ever funny enough? Well, let me be a bit clearer. It doesn't mean everything has to be funny or to be made fun of. But just like one has the choice of accepting or questioning whatever comes to you, there's also the choice of seeing it as amusing in some way. It's a choice you may not make in many circumstances, but it's one that I find myself making surprisingly often. For example, is there anybody here who ever thought that paying attention to your breath is funny? How about a body scan? Now that's funny, right? Anyone? Oh, well.
When you say it, I can see how it's funny.
Great. To be sure, life is not just funny. It's also miraculous, tragic, confusing, depressing, frightening, beautiful, and so on. Funny goes better with some of these than with others. You can mix and match and see which combinations you like the best. And like all art, it's creative. Artificial intelligences have no sense of humor. You can't tickle them. Only humans can actually create humor. It comes from within. I don't like the word humor particularly. It makes me think of the four humors, you know, phlegm, black bile, yellow, whatever. They were supposed to be kept in balance to be healthy. That was before the germ theory replaced it. The word humor itself isn't funny. It isn't even anti-funny. The word funny is better. Comedy is good. For those of you who remember the Middle Ages, St. Anselm used the word absurd. I like absurdist humor myself. It avoids some of the complicated political issues that can arise. Liz will get into some of those. What our saint meant was that life wasn't exactly understandable, even by those who find, say, a process model easy reading. Today, we would say that the explicit always falls short of the intricate implicit, that communication really takes place beyond words. As Monty Python would put it, it takes place on the level of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Know what I mean? Anyhow, that's how I was planning to start today. And in fact, that's how I did start today. And it's not exactly wrong, but it's missing something. Timothy Leary used to say, when you first start your LSD trip, finding the world hilarious, you usually end up finding the joke was on you. I was not born finding the world funny, but I was born into a family that liked to make fun of everything and everybody and each other. When I was a kid, I found it upsetting to be the object of ridicule. But when I got angry, my mother would explain, it's just a joke. Do we have to hold up a sign that says joke on it? And I didn't want to be the person who couldn't take a joke. So I learned to pretend that it was okay, which, as you know, is different from it actually being okay. Seeing everything as potentially funny creates a distance. And some distance is good. It keeps you from taking yourself too seriously. A lot of what works as funny out there is making fun of the pompous and self-involved. And there's a lot of it to make fun of. And it's good to be able to distance oneself from the habitual ways of looking at the world. The problem arises if you distance yourself from everything. I need to clarify this for the Buddhists among us who might be thinking, isn't distancing yourself from everything non-attachment? Isn't it staying apart from the world, being in the world but not of it? Well, it can look like non-attachment, but it isn't really. Like when I was a child pretending to be able to take a joke, it's fake non-attachment. The attachment is still there, only hidden. And that's when you find out the joke is on you, or I should say, that's what I found out. Okay, so that's a funny story right there. So as the opener, I'm supposed to warm up the crowd for the real comedians. So raise your hand if you're warm now. We check the air conditioning. You know, I'm a little warm myself. Next on will be Lynn. I want you to give her a warm help is welcome and make her feel at home. And please laugh at all her jokes. I mean, do I have to hold up a sign that says joke? Take it away, Lynn.
Okay. Well, I love the theory, but your promise that the other two people were going to be funnier. Oh, I'm also, as you know, one of those theoretical types. And I had dinner with my friend Michelle last night, and I told her all these things I was going to say about humor. And Michelle looked at me very sincerely and she said, those are very good thoughts, but they aren't funny. So I said, but then what do you think is funny? And Michelle thought for a minute and she said, well, I think of my 6-year-old self. And my favorite joke was about 2 men walk into a bar. Ouch! I don't
Okay, I'm unmuting to laugh, Lynn.
I think everybody has to unmute themselves for this. So I did really like her childhood joke. And I was thinking that many of the funny things that we remember are things from childhood where we were able to conceptualize and laugh at things that were very confusing or unacceptable, or all kinds of, jokes about the body and bathroom stuff and all that kind of stuff that we would laugh at as kids. And humor is quite magical. Before I get into saying why I think humor is magical, I'd like you to take a moment and think about the question I asked Michelle. What do you think is funny? And just take a moment there and remember a joke, a situation, a scene in a movie, a cartoon. If you have a pen or a phone, just make a little note.
I can't connect to the Wi-Fi network. You might want to check the connection settings in the Google Home app.
Now that's the funniest thing we've heard. One of the things about humor is that you have to sort of relax into it. Or maybe you don't. It takes over you and it relaxes you. So we want to just take this minute to let it do that. Remember a time of laughing, or sometimes some humor isn't laughable, but it has this satisfaction about it. That says it. It puts words or images to something. I spoke to my friend Joan Clagsburn and told her that we were going to do this reflection this morning. And she said that Jean Genlin had said to her, humor is wonderful because it gives us a different perspective, a new perspective. And I thought, and Jim really is referring to that too, right, in your theory. And I think that is part of the magic of it. Humor sort of lures us, seduces us, brings us along, introduces us to a different reality slowly, and then a surprise. And we wake up in a different reality, a different world, a different perspective. Sometimes against our will. We might not want to laugh at this person's joke or cleverness or way of seeing things. But the laugh is also a release. It's a kind of release into this new world. And the perspective of humor is often, as Jim said, sort of the ridiculous, the absurd, the lighthearted, and sometimes taking things that are very, very heavy and overwhelming and making them lighter. Sometimes helping us to feel less helpless. But taking us by surprise, which is a big, big thing. I think of an international focusing conference that I went to years ago. And after dinner, we were all gathering around, people from all over the world. And those of you who are from other countries, other cultures, I'd love to know what you think is funny that we've said this morning. So we were gathering around after dinner and telling jokes. And Robin Cappy told this little joke that was a cartoon that she described in this gathering. And she said, there was an egg and there was a chicken lying in bed side by side. And the chicken, people laughing already, the chicken laid back on his pillow. You notice I'm saying his pillow, with a cigar. And the egg said, well, that satisfies that old question. Steph really liked that joke. Steph, what do you like about it?
What came first, the chicken or the egg? Yeah. I mean, what I like about it is it brings up a lot of personal feelings. That's what I like about it. It
yeah,
personally resonates, and that's what I like about it.
right. Yes.
And I would rather not talk about that, but yeah.
Well, that actually is my third point, but I'll say it. I'll say it now that humor helps us to say the unsayable, like therapy. I always say this about therapy, and bear the unbearable, right? And we can't just talk about coming, right? And who comes first. We can't. This joke helps us to name something that we wouldn't talk about casually in this group. Was there anybody else who liked this joke, who could say something about what they liked about it?
Yeah, I'd like to say one of the things I loved about that, we've all seen 100,000 pictures of a chicken sitting on the egg, and the absolute freshness and the equality of the egg and the chicken side by it's just a whole new perspective. It was really pleasing. And I must say, and also a second thing, when you pulled out the cigar,
Uh-huh.
that was just kind of shocking, but the whole thing. And I got to solve it and the pleasure of solving it. Oh, many delicious things about that joke, including, I'm shocked, I never heard that joke. Ever.
Oh,
And
I never had either.
It's a fab.
It is. It is. Well, in this focusing conference, what was the funniest was that we were trying to translate it into other languages and tell people what was funny about it. And as we would try to tell people what was funny about it, we were all laughing hilariously at this scene of these focusing people trying to explain what it means to come first, to the whole puzzle of the chicken and the egg. So it's that element of surprise and irony and making things lighter. And it's also bringing people together. It brought us all together in this focusing conference, especially the part about trying to explain it and feeling more and more how absurd it was. The other thing that humor does that I mentioned is taking something very complicated that's unsayable and some way making it sayable. And I think of this well, I think of this I'm trying to decide between two jokes to tell you here. Oh, I think I'll tell you the scene from Analyze This, the movie with Billy Crystal, and he's the therapist of this mafia guy who is having anxiety attacks, and he's trying to this is like the old days of psychoanalysis, find the interpretation that will solve the case for but he's terribly ambivalent about being in this situation, being pulled into the mafia and the mafia surrounding him. And in this one scene, there's this big shootout. They're all shooting at each other, and Billy Crystal suddenly has the insight of what will solve the case, and he's hiding under the car with the mafia guy, trying to give him the interpretation, and he tells him the interpretation of his anxiety attack, and the mafia guy's going to shoot him, and he just sort of drops the gun, and he sort of sobs and falls into Billy Crystal's arms, and here's all the people shooting around them. And that was so funny to me and to many other therapists that were originally trained in the old psychoanalysis, where the interpretation was something. But I don't know if that would have been very funny to other people that weren't trained that way, or weren't therapists. Humor can be universal, and it can be very particular. It can bring people together, but it can also really separate people. A friend of mine invited me to a comedic show, and it was a big deal. You had to get tickets way in advance and all of that. And I went to this show, made all kinds of arrangements, and it just left me flat. I didn't know what was funny about it. And as the show was going on, I was thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? And it felt like being on a hot date. And would I fake the orgasm or not in the intermission? What would I say about this play? And luckily, I was very lucky. My friend didn't think it was funny either, and I didn't have to fake it and say, oh, well, I thought something or other. But there's a very lonely feeling about everybody laughing at something or laughing at you, right? And you're separated from the in group, the in crowd, the in joke.
Yeah.
And you so want to be able to be part of the in joke that you might be be duplicitous. You might pretend that it's okay, or that you love it when you don't. And I think Liz is going to talk about that a little bit more when it's her turn. The thing that I want to emphasize so much in this is that element of surprise and the element of just being caught up in something. And this element of the perspective bringing a lot of this implicit stuff all together for you. So Christine has a cartoon that she'll show, which is one of my favorite jokes, funny things. And let's look at that.
Which one do you want first?
Let's just we won't do both. We won't do the meeting. We'll do the woman with the other one. Would somebody read that out loud?
Sit, stay, make up for everything that's wrong in my life.
Okay. What happens to you when you see that? I'm wondering if we can take it away now. I'm wondering if that's funny for everybody, or is it funny mostly for people like me who felt that I had to make up for everything that was wrong in my mother's life?
I thought, can I say something?
Yeah, please, I'm asking.
I thought what she said was very funny, but I didn't like the picture of her, making her look kind of weird and ugly.
Ah,
I didn't like that they had to do that to her.
Aha, you didn't want, you were identifying with her. Yes.
I identified with her too. For me, it was the perspective of a dog owner. So it was a little funny to me and sort of real that, it's easier to relate to my dog than everybody else, like human beings.
Yes. Isn't it wonderful when we think about and we can say, oh, I didn't think that was funny. Another cartoon that I couldn't find shows a big person like that pointing at a cat ominously and saying, don't you dare think outside of the box.
Funny.
What's funny about that, Susan?
Well, it's like there's the litter box. That's what I'm thinking of. And the cat is about to, to do something. Although I can't see that as a cat. I can see that as a dog
Okay.
somehow.
And those whose English isn't your first language, you may not be familiar with the
Oh, the
phrase,
box.
thinking outside of the box.
There's also, I'm thinking of the cartoon before where the big woman is scolding this poor little thing. That makes me a little uncomfortable. So, because it makes me think of when I was like a mother, mean to my kids, taking stuff out on them with that edge. So I think humor can have discomfort.
Yes, humor unsettles us as it gives us a new perspective. And the new perspective might not be a perspective we like, oh, maybe the mother shouldn't expect the kid to fulfill her life. Yes, yes. And Liz is going to be talking more about the dark side of humor and the complexities of it. So I'm going to hand you over to Liz.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Reading. Okay. Humor often exposes something that people don't want to say out loud. Sometimes you might be the one who sometimes you might want to be the one who says it, but sometimes you don't want to suffer the consequences of that. You want to shout out, or as Gendlin says, pour out what's on your mind, but you don't want to offend, or maybe you do. But you want to offend the right people and leave the nice people alone. As they say in comedy, you want to punch up at power and pretentiousness and hypocrisy. You don't want to punch down at the vulnerable. At least that's the theory, but the impulse to punch down can be strong. Mel Brooks said, "Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die." But if you're empathic, a helper, quote unquote, you don't want to see anybody get hurt. For a short period of time in my life, I did some stand-up comedy. Here is a little snippet of my first stand-up comedy set at the Duplex, a club in Greenwich Village in 1990. So now we need the clip, and I hope you can make out the words. Who's going to
It's not easy getting older, especially when you're still single. But the thing that really upsets me the most is that it's my understanding that most serial killers have a better social life than I do. I mean, I read in the newspaper the night before Ted Bundy was executed, they said he was visited by his fiancée. I mean, these people date. These people have more committed, meaningful relationships while locked up than I can manage as a free woman living in New York. But don't you wonder, what are these women looking for? Who are these women who are attracted to serial killers? I mean, don't you wonder? Yes, Mom, I know you want to introduce me to that root canal man, but I'm involved. Yeah, with that guy in Florida. You might have heard of him. Uh-huh. Yeah, the 27 co-eds. Uh-huh. The machete. Mm-hmm. Right. What are these women looking for who are dating serial killers? You know, you have to wonder that. He expresses his feelings. He likes to get really close to women, and he makes me feel so open and vulnerable.
That is wonderful.
I hope you could hear the words. The sound wasn't so great, but okay. So who am I making fun of here? And would I do it the same way today? Well, first of all, I am mocking myself. I'm saying that I'm such a social loser that a serial killer can find love, whereas I could not. When I took comedy workshops, I was taught to make my character, my persona, vulnerable, so I'd always be punching up. My history as the class clown at school made me a natural at this. I would make fun of the teacher, but then the other kids mocked me. There was much shame involved in my taking that license. Also, as a woman, the tradition has been that women comedians were self-deprecators. Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers were models for this. In my comedy material, I felt a painful conflict about both making fun of myself and those other pathetic women who could only find love with men who killed women. Of course, I understood the psychodynamics of what that was all about, my own insecurities and those of women who were obsessed with violent men who were now locked up and couldn't hurt them anymore. After all, I was a professional therapist, not to mention a near professional patient. I understood lots of stuff, but instead of having, quote, high self-esteem and spending my spare time writing boring academic papers about psychodynamics, I went for the laughs, sometimes the cheap laughs. And people appreciated that I was telling a kind of truth that they could relate to. But there are a lot of different truths, and we have to choose which truths we're willing to say out loud. Humor is a tightrope. I still have the punching up versus punching down conflict. I even have it here at Help for Helpers at times. Sometimes I want to be one of the seemingly all good people who seem never to have a mean, mocking thought. At other times, I want to make fun of the goody-goodiness of, quote, helping. Is that punching down? Sometimes it seems as if it's punching up. Sometimes it seems as if calling oneself a helper is expressing a kind of puffed upness. Look at me, I'm one of the good ones who wants everyone to be happy and authentic, and I'm so accepting, and I want to save the planet, and I only have these high and lofty motivations. But why do I question that those altruistic, empathic motives are the whole story for some people? Well, I was actually brought up to be a cynic by my iconoclastic debunking parents and sister. I was raised to see beneath the pretty surfaces and call out the more defensive, less noble parts of ourselves. Get over yourself would be an expression that's relevant there. In this sense, comedy and psychoanalysis are close cousins. But I also realize that the very tendency to call out whatever I'm compelled to do so at any moment is itself my defense against what? Vulnerability, intimacy, feeling that I'm with other people. I have to be apart, looking and judging. So where does this leave me in my conflict? Well, focusing is supposed to help to see what there is there in its actual immediate fullness, to look beyond the obvious defensiveness of both self-criticism and harsh judgments of others, to understand and empathize, and ultimately more fully accept both you and me as we are all interaction. In this way, focusing can open up these fixed concepts and stories and give them some air to see them new. But sometimes I feel like one of those people who don't want to take antidepressants because they are afraid of losing a part of their personalities, that a part that's precious to them, that critical edge. If that part evaporates or even evolves out of itself, who will I be? A Stepford wife of focusing? A gratitude bot? So I want to keep my edge, but I also don't want to be, well, a schmuck. This is always a good life goal, I think, trying to avoid schmuckdom. But on the other hand, sometimes schmuckdom is the price you have to pay to express all those weird and unacceptable nooks and crannies that are also a real part of who we are. And speaking of us, what do you think? Am I the only one who sits in a room like this with this sort of conflict? Please tell me I'm not. Any comments?
You're not.
I love schmuckdom.
Yes.
I had to choose. We have to make these big comedy choices between schmuckdom and assholishness. Yeah, I had another one. I can't, whatever. Yiddish always seems to get in there somewhere.
I
Trying to
love
be funny.
schlumpf too.
Schmuck. Yeah, right. The schmuck was the main. Everybody know what schmuck is, by the way?
A loser?
Schmuck is a wonderful word from the Yiddish because it actually means a piece of jewelry that hangs. And it's a euphemism
Yeah.
for the penis.
What? That's funny.
Now that's funny.
Just want to thank you, Liz. I'm sorry, Susan.
Yeah, it's lit. It's funny. It's scholarly in tone. Can you hear me? Can people
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You're fine, Susan.
That's, I mean, it's a lot to take in. It's
Yeah.
because it's good. I think we're trying to take it in, but I'm struck by the discrepancy, between the scholarly, it's like a spoof on a scholar, because it comes off a little bit scholarly, but it's not. I mean, it has discomfort in it.
You're too kind.
And the vulnerability.
I'm curious about what the discomfort is, Susan, for you.
For me, or for Liz.
Well, for you, because you said there
Oh gosh. Well, I think because I feel like a schmuck, you know? I felt like a schlumpf, but that's close to a schmuck. Yeah, I mean, that's a person, isn't it, who dresses very schmuckily, schlumpfily.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I feel, I mean, I've struggled with that my whole life. So it's a tender place. I wouldn't want everybody to know. And yet it's broadcasted being a schlumpf and maybe being a schmuck, because it's how you feel about yourself. Like you're always fucking it up.
But you know, I think a schmuck, as I meant it, is more aggressive.
Yes, I get, than a schlumpf.
A schlumpf is kind of doesn't know what's going on. A schmuck is
Yeah.
more sticks herself in there in some kind of inappropriate, aggressive way. I mean, we could also distinguish between a schlemiel and a schlemazel, but I don't think this is a joys of Yiddish help for helpers. Maybe we should have one sometime. But it's similar distinction between passive and active or aggressive.
Well, are you schmuck? That's I mean, I can hear that. Don't be a schmuck.
Mm-hmm. And it
That was,
implies
that's funny.
stay back. Don't, push yourself.
Susan, you just saying that was funny.
Liz, I absolutely loved your bit. I mean, it was hysterical. And I realized that with humor for me is the ability to kind of laugh at myself, because I was identifying with that thing of like how far I'll go to relationship, what I'll give up of myself. And, it is funny. And sometimes, the truth is funny, and it's a way of seeing oneself and accepting or seeing that side of oneself and being able to laugh at myself and go, oh my God, I'm doing this to myself. And so I found that brilliant and hysterical. And yeah, I don't know. I was curious when you said, would I do that today? And I also understood like that's self-deprecating. And I was curious when you said that, would I do that today? Would I tell that joke today? I was a bit curious about that.
Well, there's couple of things. First is that I was a working psychotherapist then, and not that anybody would come to this little club or something, but it was just a fear, that what if a patient saw me in speaking like this? I can't get a boyfriend and making fun of people. I mean, it's the antithesis of what a psychotherapist is supposed to be like. And that is what I was trying to express in what I read, the different parts of ourselves, and the feeling I have, which I think at this point I know is an illusion, but I'm never quite sure, is that people, and Lynn, you would be the absolute epitome of this, of somebody who doesn't waver from kind of, even when you can be I don't want to say nasty, but you can be critical of things too, but there's just something about a goodness that I don't have, that my tendency would be, oh, but we're all, not, but we're all expressing, no, it would be.
Well, I'm about to confirm what you're saying, even though I want to disconfirm it.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking is that if your client did come and was having that problem about getting a boyfriend, they might find that a self-object experience,
Well,
it might
that's a
be very,
wonderful point, because when I presented part of my graphic memoir at another Help for Helpers, I brought up the point that I talked about having an anxiety disorder, and how many patients, I mean, how disturbed do you want your therapist to be? There should be somehow you should have somewhat have it more together than your patients, I think. Otherwise, I mean, maybe that's where focusing comes in that there's a mutuality. But I mean, maybe it's another way of seeing being a therapist, rather than that you're the expert, which is how I was sort of trained. And, my therapists were my experts, and I revered them, and I, idealized them. Maybe there should be more of a mutuality thing, that, I can have all kinds of messy stuff going on too. And it doesn't mean that I can't relate to, a patient's or a client's experience. Even the fact that people here often don't say patient anymore. Now we're all, clients. There's a watered down kind of mutuality to the whole thing. But anyway, that was one point, was the self-deprecation. But I wanted to also put the second point in, which is that how can I make fun of women, pathetic sort, I mean, that's not a nice word, but let's say I'm making fun of desperate women who are writing to serial killers and getting engaged to them, which is obviously, a problem. It's kind of not a great way to live. And I'm just making fun of it, rather than this kind of, oh, I understand. And so there's a split between the comedy part and the therapist part that would be nice if it could be integrated in some nice way, rather than put in these separate pockets. See what I mean?
I don't,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, for me, somehow the end piece, the very end thing that you said, felt more like making fun at. But for most of it, partly maybe because you set up, like you said, the vulnerability at the beginning, but for most of it, I felt like you were stepping into these women's shoes, and in a way could say that because you'd already put yourself in that category. You know what I mean?
Well, I
So
had
that
some
it felt like
thoughts.
empathetic.
I had some. I remember putting a personal ad in New York Magazine, and sometimes you'd get prisoners. I thought, well, I don't know, maybe that's maybe that wouldn't be so bad. I'd have a lot of time to myself, and they're always available.
I don't
Yeah,
think
but
that it's necessarily too different. What therapy and humor have in common is this seeking surprise and altering your, as Jim would say, your attitude or your perspective, and putting you in a different place. And humor does it sort of instantly. But they go together in a certain way. Therapy is more going to a different perspective through digesting your own, and humor is sort of just, you find yourself in this different, breaking out into a different perspective. But I think they work together very well, to me. And I think that we have to be able to have humor with our clients. When you describe me, Liz, as this person that emanates goodness, it sounds very humorless to me. But I think that humor is a kind of play, and Winnicott says, without play, therapy can't happen. We're always playing with the implicit.
Well, I just wanted to, yeah, I mean, I think that what I wrote, it says that there are different kinds of humor. So the therapist and the child can play together, but the therapist should not make fun of the child.
One of the things that we didn't really talk about that that I would love you to talk about more at a different point, because it deserves a whole helper's reflection, is that humor is a weapon. And
Bingo.
humiliating people, like all the jokes about Trump and
Right.
how we're humiliated in school by bullies, is something that I think is from my point of view incredibly problematic. And yet people, when I've said this to friends, they said, but if I don't do that, if I don't use humor in politics, I can't bear it. I need that release. And so what do we do when we need this weapon somehow as humans, when we feel helpless, and humor is the only thing that sort of gives us a feeling of a universe where we're not the helpless victims, but we're the the judges.
Well, I think it's more nuanced than, just to answer. It's more nuanced than that. It's great. Political humor can be great, but it's how it's if you're humiliating somebody, as opposed to being like some of the late night talk shows, and well, just there's great political humor, but they're not humiliating even the worst guy. They're being smart and clever and witty about it, and that's really hard. Few people do that really well, but I don't think, there's nothing really wrong with that. But I wanted to say also, I'm not exactly sure what I'm illustrating here politically, but it occurred to me, that we probably don't have a lot of time, that people criticized Trump against McCain. This was a famous thing. It was a terrible thing that Trump said. McCain was saying that he was a soldier. That was one of his big deal. But he happened to be a prisoner of war, and I was a prisoner of war. And Trump made a comment like, I like my soldiers to not get caught. And people hated him for that. And that was one of the moments where I felt ashamed, because I agreed with Trump. That was one of the, look at Cassell. Yes, I felt that way. I felt, and that whole thing about, well, never mind, I won't go on, but I agreed with Trump there. And I know you're not allowed to agree with Trump in our circle. But I thought it was funny. I thought that Trump was making a point. If you're going to brag about being a soldier, you have to win. You can't lose in any way. So maybe this is kind of a tangential to what we're talking about, but I don't really think it is, because I think that I don't know what I'm saying. Am I saying that I agreed with Trump about something? And that, yeah, I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but I think, what am I saying? There's a solemnity, and there's a solemnity about being a soldier that Trump was saying, fuck that, that it's, never mind. I'm sorry I brought that up.
Maybe we should leave the not knowing what we're saying, which
Lynn, I kind of like, I want to find my voice rather than saying nothing. And it's kind of almost like that, just being part of something. And once you're a participant, then you're belonging, So I think sometimes if humor, and especially Jim, you mentioned Monty Python, John Cleese said very clearly that they wouldn't be able to say that now, or get out The Life of Brian. The Life of Brian would not be. So I suppose with the cancel culture, so just around your sensing into the difference between tragedy and comedy, I think it's very like about being vulnerable. you know, that we have to be very courageous. It has to be very safe. And so what if I'm not funny? You know, it's the vulnerability and the safety of well, I don't so much safety within myself, I suppose, to take a chance, you know, because I love laugh out humor, and I love kind of like the side jokes, or not at people's expense, but sometimes I think it's necessary to just allow that part of ourselves tell us what we're feeling, you know, really to let us know. And when you were talking, Jim, in the beginning, if we lose our sense of humor, well, yeah, that's a huge loss, isn't it? There's something really missing, you know, in that. Yeah, I really was enamored in all of you standing up, Liz, as a younger woman, as a comic, you know, and the idea of being jealous of the women that would be visited by a psychopath, sociopath, that they were. And I think sometimes us therapists can take ourselves far too seriously. At least, you know, we should have it sorted out, you know, we shouldn't get it wrong. And I think that's the joke is on us at that stage. So yeah, thank you so much. Love the chicken and egg and the cigar, of course. Thank you.
You know what else I wanted to share? Thank you so much, Pauline, was that when Liz, when you were speaking, what came to me is that humor's freedom. Humor is freedom. And I think when we're feeling oppressed by people, the ability to find humor in what they're saying, like, are you flipping kidding me? Like, you know, it's sort of like, and there's freedom in that. And that's what I think for me, being able to feel free in the face of oppression is really important, and humor is that for me.
I love the way you said that, Steph.
Thank you.
Freedom.
I want to say something also. I think humor to me is a foreign language. I'm totally out of the sense of humor from young, actually. I cannot enjoy cartoons as how my brother can enjoy. He can actually look at the TVs and then read all the cartoons, and then he can laugh with all the fun, I don't know, the Tom and Jerry's and all this. But I cannot appreciate any part of it. So as I am trying to understand the humor, I feel myself sinking into it, maybe drowning in all the things about humor. I cannot understand any bit of it. I come from a zero state, and I'm going to be like going out from, it's like, okay, this is a room of talk, how should I put it? Maybe there is like it's like I'm standing in front of a cliff. Okay. But there's nothing. It's like the voice cannot go in from my ears to another. It's like it cannot be processed somehow. So that bad. So maybe our brains, I think, whether you are, what's the word just now? Punch up or punch down, at least there is some wire in your brains that is able to do that, to decide on whether you want to make it this or that. And enjoy the humor.
I'm so glad you said that, Key.
Yeah. I find myself lost in all
That
this.
it's another
forest.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so
And
I
you
would just
don't
like to
get-
say, Hugh C., you just about 30 seconds ago, you broke out laughing. And so you do find things funny. You might be finding things funny that you're not categorizing. In fact, one of the interesting people who study, and go around with their binoculars and report, I think the average adult American laughs 20 to 50 times a day. That's about the stat. And what's interesting is quite often, we're not laughing at something funny that we would say, oh, that's funny, but we're laughing in unison, a group harmony. I want to say something about Lynn. Liz. So I transcribed a whole bunch of comedy nights out of curiosity to see what was making years ago. And one of the things that shocked me is a lot of laughter, huge from stand-ups came from just the comic saying something that was true and not funny if you read it. So here's the sample. I used to adore my mother, but now I realize she's not so smart. That's not funny, but said with the right, indignation, exasperation, the audience laughed. And I was shocked at how much of the average good stand-up, is it just actually saying the truth. So Liz, what you were saying about women writing to the murderers, that's just true. And it's so friggin' irrational. You gotta laugh at it. So I think a lot of those laugh, and that was a great bit, by the way. Bravo, fun doing. Is people just laugh when you say the truth that's not often discussed. And it's not funny.
That's why I brought up the taboo of liking something Trump said, because you're not allowed that it's a good example because it's flipping something over, right? Because he was speaking a truth that nobody will say, which is that not all war heroes are so heroic. And I bring it up also because there's a reason why millions and millions of people go, yeah, you're right at those rallies. Because he is getting into something that's real for a lot of people. And that's one of them. There's a sort of, the hypocrisy of many things.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I just want to say one thing. So, Sue, I'm probably mangling your name. I beg your pardon. But I want to say, it might be fun if you could be conscious enough to through the day, every time you laugh, see if you can notice when you're laughing during the day. Because if you're a normal human being, if you're within the normal, you probably laugh 20 or 30 times a day. It'd be fun to see what actually makes you laugh.
Yeah. And I was also thinking that I have a feeling that when maybe you were 3 years old or 2 years old, you thought some things were funny, but not to do a whole analysis, but also when I also noticed that you did laugh when you told us about this, and you were laughing at yourself. You were kind of saying, look at me, do you believe it?
No, I think what confused me is what is funny and the facial expressions. I mean, something that confused me is something that is visual. I can see that person is so serious talking about a joke or talking about, like you say, that is a fact. That is a truth about what the Trump is saying. But as you are saying, that is something that is to be laughed at, but I didn't see it's funny or it's like it's confused for me.
You didn't have the emotional reaction.
I don't think those Jerry commercials where they're bashing people, I never thought those were funny either.
I was thinking that too, but I don't think that's funny either.
and I don't think Curb Your Enthusiasm is funny. I mean, there's things that, you have taste, but if somebody has claimed the right to decree in my family what's funny and what isn't, then I might think of myself as not funny for not enjoying humor. And I do notice one of the things, Liz, your talk brought up in me was thinking about family history. Only how humor was in my family, how humor was in my husband's family, you know, and how humor in the family that we created together.
Yeah, yes, that's such an interesting thing to think about. I think humor, like sexuality, is so individual and so particular. Each of us have our very own way of having humor or not having humor, or what we laugh at, or sometimes humor isn't even laughable, but just the sense of a smile or a recognition.
Yeah.
And it's so much part of us. I was thinking in the breakout rooms, but if we're going to do breakout rooms, we have to do them right now. We could think about our own humor and come back to what we thought was funny, that I asked you to write down
There
a
are two
while back.
people, Natty and Dorothy have hands up. I don't know if you want to do that
Yeah,
now.
of course.
Okay, thank you, Liz. So I was just thinking about that, especially because of what was happening to me as different jokes were coming up, and as I'm not an English speaker, sometimes I had to think about it. For example, with the cat, I didn't know that the box was called the box. so I said, but what is funny about this? And then okay. So there, what I thought was there's something so very cultural and so about language in many ways. And also this, what you have just said, Lynn, about there's something universal, because if not, otherwise there wouldn't be comedians who bring up many people and they all laugh and they all find it happy. But then there's an individual way, an individual side that has to do with experiences, with our own histories, with our own. So, for example, I am a person who loves laughing, and many times I just get together with my friends and we laugh at anything. And but there's something about the shared, something about the complicity, the sharedness, the we know each other, so we can laugh and we can just look at each other, and this happens in groups, in communities. So I was just, and then there's this thing that humor can bring a totally different reality to something that is a tragedy, and then there's humor about it. But then also there's this part when people can feel so left out, so distant, so like, oh, and I've been realizing, oh, I'm not understanding what is that joke, like with the hen and with the egg and I didn't understand, because the word, the verb come is not, I know the meaning, but I have to think about it. It doesn't come naturally. So then this, and I was feeling myself, oh yes, there's this quality of being, wow, the wonder about humor, and then be left aside because I'm not part, because I'm not getting it, and what's going on with me that I'm not getting it. So, and this happens, and I've been a teacher for a long time, and with adolescents, this is something that is always the case, that it's funny, but it's funny for some people and it's not funny for others. And the laughing at and laughing with. So this is a huge topic, and it's wonderful because it brings out so many things about our own experiences and our experiences with others. I guess that's what I wanted to share.
Yes, and this was your suggestion, Liz, which is a wonderful one. I think instead of breakout rooms, we're really speaking as a group. Let's continue, because we don't have time really for breakout rooms, but there was someone else who had their hand up. Dorothy.
I just wanted to say how much I'm appreciating Liz, Jim, and you, Lynn, for doing this, because comedy has always been something like out there for me. And what Natty and he and what you have been saying, it's just very helpful to me, because that whole idea of comedy is, it's not like I'm stupid, but it's always been in the intellectual realm that I can't reach it. Like Natty said, I'm English and I don't get half the jokes, I mean, I'm American, I speak English. And it's like, it's just felt like I'm not a part of, because I don't get it. And I love what, I think it was Miggs that said something about, and you all have alluded to this, that when you laugh, if there's a harmony, you're just a part of this particular small group or larger group. But I love to laugh, and I love that sense of harmony. So this sort of gave me a freedom, like Steph was alluding to, that, just let that go when you don't get it. Let go that child piece that doesn't get it, that's born so early in a family or whatever, you're you're the outsider. Like, let that go more, and give myself the freedom to not get it, but yet enjoy when I can, laugh when I can. I do love to laugh and be a part of. So thank you all.
I was just thinking that when I lived for many, many years in Austria, I never got a joke. Because it was, it's so tied up with language. But sometimes I'd laugh anyway. And every now and then I get caught, like, did you really understand that? I'm like, no, but if I did, I would, when everybody else is, I would never laugh. But, and I always think I have this little dog, and if I didn't have my dog, I think I wouldn't laugh. So it's not just jokes, it's just the little funny things about life. But I did have the urge to tell y'all my favorite childhood joke. Do you mind? It's quite short. All right. Now, I don't know when I learned it. Maybe I was 6 or something, but why does the Pope wear underpants in the shower?
Right. I heard that, but
I'm unemployed.
Because I didn't say that again.
He doesn't want to look down on the unemployed.
And this was a childhood joke.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are many people who would not laugh at that joke. By the way, so I did an independent study in college on humor, and one of my projects, from Parade magazine, I cut out like 10 or 15 very general, middle class, very kind of polite but funny cartoons. Nothing racy, nothing religious. I want a very broad spectrum. And for the next 2 weeks, I was showing these drawn cartoons to people and saying, one, do you think this cartoon is funny? And if so, why? And what shocked me is cartoons that were screamingly obvious to me. Some people go, I don't get it. And other people would say, oh, they are screamingly funny, and they would laugh. And then I would say, and why is that funny? And they would tell me why they thought that was funny. That made me think, you're from a different friggin' planet. Their explanation of why I couldn't. Anyway, so if adventure over the week, especially if you're self-conscious about your humor, cut out a couple cartoons and show them to friends and say, do you think this is funny? And if so, why? Both questions. And I'm just floored I'm still floored to this day at the different interpretations. That, how did you get there?
June?
Yes, I just want to say that we can also laugh at visuals. Every morning, I get up and across the street from me, parents are taking their kids to school up the block. And I can just stand at the window and laugh and laugh and laugh, partly relating, partly admiring the ability of the parents to be doing something difficult. Some of them are carrying stuff that they're obviously going to take to work with them, but also helping their kid with a scooter, you know, or, I mean, it's just so funny watching these parents doing 10 things at once, taking their kids to school, and it's hysterical. And it's something one can relate to, and it's a joy every morning.
I'm curious about what other people
about you. I mean,
sorry, Casil.
I was just saying that says a lot about June, that she makes that it gives her joy. Yeah.
I'd like to throw in one of my favorite Freud quotes here. I wish I had it literally, but Freud said somewhere about the talking cure. He said any session that happens and the client patient has not laughed or cried, nothing worthwhile has happened.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, if you want, I'll dig down in my quote file, see if I can find the source. But I remember writing it down because I thought, oh, that's focusing. Because I've been shocked at the number of times. Or I'll break out laughing at things that aren't funny, but it's the release of energy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
You know, I just wanted to speak to Liz, what you said about the client-patient relationship, if that's okay. Because I've had a lot of therapists. I've worked as a sponsor in 12-step program to other people. And what I found is that the best therapists I have, and I have now, are the ones who really talk about their own issues a little bit and how they've overcome them. And I feel related to them. And I know there's supposed to be this hierarchy, that I've had that as well. And that's helped me at certain phases of my recovery, so to speak. But I also feel that connection is so important for me, to feel that someone else has overcome something or has a tool to overcome something, rather than I'm supposed to live up to some ideal of being in control or in that place. So I don't know if that speaks to anything, but it's just, and also in a certain area that I have been involved with, the therapists do share their experience of, you know, life. And I just find it helpful for me personally, just sharing. Thanks.
Well, I want to tell a story about that.
Thanks.
I had this I'll call her a patient, which means one who suffers, by the way, who was telling a story how she can't throw things away. She had this empty box that she got a present in this box, and the present is no longer alive, but she couldn't throw away the box. So she has this box. And I said to her, "Oh, I understand what you're saying. You know, I have, you know, I've had that feeling." And her response was, "Then I guess you can't help me with this."
That's great, because Steph, I was going to respond also that you made a point of saying a problem that the therapist has overcome, whereas I'm talking about problems that one has not overcome. Big difference, I think. There's the I was lost, but now I'm found, amazing grace of a minister. But then there's we're all messes together.
Right, right, got it.
Yeah, I have to stick in my 2 cents, even though I don't want to. I think it's that people need their therapist to represent something. Either they need them to represent overcoming, or they need them to represent being like me, you know, we're in it together, or they need them to represent the parent that's going to make it okay. And they may need the therapist to represent the one that really enjoys them and gets them. And, you know, we all have different needs of our therapist, but always to be larger than life in some kind of way.
Right.
Can I read a poem?
Yes. And then we'll have Dorothy's poem.
Yeah.
Yes,
Too
go ahead.
generous. I threw out stale jelly donuts to my friends the grackles along with their seed. And now one poor fellow staggers and falls, his foot plunged deep into the soft raspberry center. Free at last he rolls and flies, perching one leg on a birch limb. He cranks the other foot up and down in the morning air to see if it will dry, and yells at me, shuddering with rage, or the sheer feeling of repellent novelty. Do you mind telling me what the hell this is I've got between my goddamn toes?
Wow. It really brings us by surprise into another universe, a different perspective, doesn't it?
There was something that just led me to that poem, just the whole ridiculousness of things that happen that finally you just have to laugh at. Yeah. Thanks.
It helps us to notice things that we wouldn't notice. Okay, Dorothy.
Okay, more ridiculousness and absurdity from Lewis Carroll, The Mad Gardener's Song. And I'm going to do select verses because of time. But please Google The Mad Gardener's Song when you have time. He thought he saw a buffalo upon the chimney piece. He looked again and found it was his sister's husband's niece. Unless you leave this house, he said, I'll send for the police. He thought he saw a rattlesnake that questioned him in Greek. He looked again and found it was the middle of next week. The one thing I regret, he said, is that it cannot speak. He thought he saw a banker's clerk descending from the bus. He looked again and found it was a hippopotamus. If this should stay to dine, he said, there won't be much for us. He thought he saw a kangaroo that worked a coffee mill. He looked again and found it was a vegetable pill. Were I to swallow this, he said, I should be very ill. He thought he saw a garden door that opened with a key. He looked again and found it was a double rule of 3. And all its mystery, he said, is clear as day to me. He thought he saw an argument that proved he was the Pope. He looked again and found it was a bar of mottled soap. A fact so dread, he faintly said, extinguishes all hope. Very silly.
Would you read the last one again? The last
verse. He thought, oh, wait a minute. He thought he saw an argument that proved he was the Pope. He looked again and found it was a bar of mottled soap. A fact so dread, he faintly said, extinguishes all hope.
Huh. Wow. I'm
I'm wondering, Dorothy, is that the unemployed thing again? Him looking down on the unemployed?
We're catapulted from universe to universe.
Yeah.
We can't even catch our breath.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Liz and Jim and all of you for taking on this wonderful subject, and maybe we'll have another celebration of comedy. It would be nice to do that every year, close to April Fool's Day. Any last comments before we go?
I'm just wondering, Jim and Liz, did you enjoy yourselves? Did you enjoy yourselves, your comedic selves? And Lynn, yeah. Do you feel good?
I'm always a wreck when
I
do anything like this. I'll enjoy myself when I get off the call and go,
yeah. Well, I just want to appreciate and grateful for the input.
Thank you, thank you, everybody.
I wanted to say that the question, did you enjoy yourself, was one of the funniest questions that I heard today.
Well, I have to think about that.
And that just transformed it into funny. Thank you, Jim.
I have one joke to tell. Can I tell a joke?
You're going
Something
to joke, Keith?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Why is the PC why is our computer, get cold?
Old.
Get cold.
Cold.
Hot or cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because somebody left the windows open.
Ha. That's very good. Right.
Thank you. That was a wonderful way to end our celebration of comedy.
Thank you for enjoying these jokes with me.
It was very funny.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.